So in this video, I want to go through with you 4 mistakes to avoid when building your own software using AI. Building your own tools and systems with AI, first and foremost, can be a huge cost saver. You don't have to hire developers or any other agencies to take this work on that used to be really expensive stuff. You might be able to get some, especially if it's slightly simpler systems, out the door much cheaper. But there are still pitfalls to be aware of. Although AI can do an awful lot of the donkey work for you and do some very clever stuff, you can still create a big mess. You can create a huge time waste and something that's very insecure and could possibly leak your data. It can be really tempting when you've got this AI machine which can just spit out thousands and thousands of lines of code each day and build some really cool stuff for you, to build too much. And this was a problem before AI could do this, with business owners being ambitious people and managers wanting more and more, of putting too much pressure on development teams and ultimately building things that weren't needed. They were outside of the core. They weren't part of the 80-20 rule. And that is to say that 80% of the system use is going to come from 20% of the features. So I think it's important that you keep features and what you build really focused. Now that'll be more important as we go on to other mistakes around budgeting for the final part of the build, which can be complicated, and maintenance. And the more things you build, the harder that's going to be over time. Also, a thing that hasn't become easier really with AI is building the right thing. So yes, we can build all this great stuff. We've got all these options for things we could put our time and attention to, but there's still great value and great difficulty in deciding which one of these things that we could do is actually the one that's going to have the biggest impact and is the right thing to do. The next big mistake to avoid is to neglect security and compliance. I've heard of numerous stories of people vibe coding their own applications only to have a quite serious data breach quite soon after launch. And whether it happens, today or in 2 years' time, it can still be extremely severe. Especially if you're holding sensitive information in the application you're building. If it's personally identifiable information or transaction data, for example, that has to be secure. There's also lots of concerns around compliance. You need cookie policies, terms and conditions if you're building user-facing websites and systems. The way you handle and store data needs consideration too. Just because AI's taken on the coding for you doesn't mean you're not responsible ultimately for these things. Even with smaller applications or applications of any size really, it's important to know where is your data held. Most companies you deal with and work with, if you're storing their data, they'll want their data stored in the UK or certainly in Europe. Some companies will not be keen on data being held in the US. Ignore my NAF drawing there. I won't try and draw the United States, but hopefully that gives you the idea. It's also important to know when you're building on these AI platforms, who actually owns the code that's built, who actually owns the database where everything is stored. Because in some cases, yes, it might be you and you've got full ownership rights and you've got ultimate control over your data, where the system runs and how it runs. But in some cases, you don't. It is the company that actually own this. Now, in the short term, this probably isn't a problem to get something out the door. But longer term, this company might change their pricing. And this has definitely happened before in the past with other platforms and made costs very high. Or they could simply just shut down and shut the platform down. And along with it goes your application. So it's not to say that these are all deal breakers or are things to avoid, but they're things that I recommend you're aware of. Now, if you're building something that is a serious application that holds some serious personal data, I'd consider getting it reviewed by an expert or even having a full penetration test where they can identify security gaps in what you've built. The third mistake to make is to not budget enough time and resource to building out the final 10%. So let me share with you how common development timelines go. With human coders, back in the day, so to say, when we used to write things by hand, we'd make quite steady progress. And then towards the end, things will start to slow down as we start to do the last bits and checks, and there's all this feedback going back and forth between, you know, what we've built and the people using it, and then the managers, back and forth, and this last section to get to done can take quite a long time. Now with AI, it's slightly different, but also very similar. So we've got AI here, and AI, instead of going steady, goes 0 to 50% done in a blink of an eye, it feels like. But then as you start to add more things, it starts to slow down, and you know, things that were okay back here might start to break. You need to go back and resolve them. But then when you get towards the end, things can go to an absolute snail pace and stall sometimes. Now you might be wondering, well, why does that matter? You know, so what if it's not, you know, 100%? And unfortunately, when it comes to security and data compliance, and sometimes just the core functionality of the application, things need to be spot on. And getting there without an engineering background can be eye-wateringly slow. So very quick at the start, extremely slow at the end sometimes. So that's not to say you can't get there, but you need to budget in your timelines for this slow bit at the end, because it is going to come. You know, it happened to developers before, and you know, it's definitely going to happen to you there, unless it's something really trivial that you're building. If it's anything complex, getting it to where it needs to be is going to take some time. So just because you've reached the halfway point in a day, don't think finishing the last half is going to take a day as well. That's just not going to happen. And the final mistake to make, which I think can be the biggest one, and certainly be the biggest nail in the foot or thorn in your side, is not considering software maintenance. A lot of people just focus on building the thing, getting it out the door, getting it working, which is great, but presumably this is something that you want to serve you, your team, and your customers for more than a few weeks' time. So I like to compare it to a car analogy. It's a pretty awful car, but if you buy a car, you are going to want to, or certainly should be, booking it in for services. You're going to need some money put aside for new tires. It might need oil changing. There might be, you know, issues with the suspension over time. Who knows? But it's going to cost. Your car is going to cost more as you own it, and is going to need servicing, and will just depreciate over time. Now, software, unfortunately, is very much the same. Not from day one, but things like servers need upgrading. It'll be on version 1.1 and you need to upgrade it to stay secure to 1.2. Someone needs to be on top of and handle those sort of things. Also, all the systems, you've got your piece of code here or platform, it will be pinned up by hundreds, if not thousands, of other applications and software packages that run it. If one of those needs upgrading, that needs to be handled. One of these might end up with a security flaw. It might be the case that a few months into using the application, you actually discover a critical bug that needs someone to jump on and fix. It might be that the way your business operates changes and someone needs to go in and add a new feature quite urgently. It could be a number of things, but software rarely is done and dusted. If you're building quite a simple tool for a single purpose, which I think is a good strategy to use with building your own software with AI, then this might not be the case so much. But if you've got any complexity in your application, you need some time and budget aside for keeping it running over the long term. This is not to put you off building your own software, but just to make you aware of some common mistakes and pitfalls you could find yourself in. AI ultimately is getting better and better, but even as it does so, you need to move with care, especially if you don't come from a software engineering background. There are going to be things that trip you up. If you're thinking of building or have built your own software with AI and you want someone to review it and give their expert eye and opinion and see if there are any big mistakes or holes in what you've built and how you've built it, do check out my Vibe Code audit. You can see the link to that in the description for this video. I can spend some time getting to see what you've built, how you've built it, and give some solid recommendations from there.